Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Before the Lights podcast. This is Tommy Canale. Today, we have an actor, producer, director, and now an author. He's penned Prairie Man, My Little House Life and Beyond, a heartwarming story of entertainment, love, and life. He played the role of Almanzo Wilder on Little House on the Prairie, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary. He's guest starred on Murder, She Wrote, The Love Boat, Who's the Boss, among many others. The producer of Emmy-nominated NBC's Golf Faraday for over 10 seasons. Let's welcome in Dean Butler. Dean, welcome to the show.
Hi, Tommy. How are you?
I am great. Born in Prince George, British Columbia, but grew up as a cowboy on a family ranch in NorCal. Was this like Horsetown? Because I know there's a thing in NorCal called Horsetown.
Yeah. So this is, it's about, 35, 40 miles southeast of San Francisco. So it's right in the heart of the Bay Area. It's Fremont, Hayward area where I grew up. Now it was much more rural when I was growing up. Now it's really, as all the Bay Area is, very developed. But where we have been since 1885, it is still pretty rural. But what the cool thing is that we can be sitting on the back porch of our house, and an hour and 15 minutes later, we could be standing in Union Square in San Francisco. So it's pretty cool.
Yes, it is. Are we still a cowboy at heart after all these years?
I think what I have is I have an empathy for, or an interest in a more rural life. I think, my grandfather envisioned himself as being a cowboy. He had a great picture of himself on his favorite horse with his favorite dog, Becky, running by his side with his hat waving in the air. And that's how he saw himself. And he wanted to transfer all that to us. What I got probably more than anything else is just an appreciation for a simpler, more or a less developed life. We're in this family place where we grew up. There was no running hot water. There was no electricity. There was, we played games at night by the light of coal oil lamps, played parcheesi and dominoes and fish, and we did the dishes by hand in the sink in the kitchen, and the water was heated on the stove to wash the dishes, and weekly baths where the water was heated. It was very Little House like. And I couldn't appreciate that as I stepped into Little House. I wasn't thinking about that, but it's all in you. Mm-hmm. When you have that life, it's just part of what makes you who you are. And as much as I didn't walk into the meetings, the Little House meetings with a cowboy hat on and dusty boots and whatever, but I think I probably carried some of that with me, whether I saw it or not, and whether it was visual to them or not. And it couldn't have been visual to them because that's not how I presented myself. But I think people see things in us very quickly. I think they just sort of figured out that, or they maybe intuited that this was something, an area that I would be comfortable in. But as it turns out, I was very, very comfortable in that world and a presentation of that world of that time. It was just very natural for me.
Dean, tell me and my listeners then, how did your childhood struggles with bullying lead you into acting?
When you're a kid and you want to be, all kids just want to get along. They want to be accepted. They want to be one of the group. Nobody wants to feel like they're a target. And I had and kids are also incredibly intuitive about finding the things that we are vulnerable with. They just know it. And for me, Tommy, that vulnerability presented itself visually as a tendency towards blushing and easy embarrassment. And kids just jumped on that when they saw it. It's such an easy thing to pick at. And of course, the more people pick at it, the more you react to it. And my lesson or my journey as a kid was to figure out that until I could learn to laugh with this teasing, that it was going to continue and become ever more unmerciful until I figured it out. So, the journey into performance was really about a search, as so many kids want to be heard, understood, respected, appreciated. So kids are always looking for that place where they belong and where they can stand out. Maybe to find that, like when we're kids, we appreciate the fastest runner, the highest jumper. We appreciate, maybe when we're young kids, we don't necessarily appreciate the kids who are great in the classroom, or they're great musicians or whatever, they show skills in these areas. I was desperately in search of finding those things where I could be seen as successful. That was really important to me. And, where acting was concerned, I was petrified of getting up in front of people as a kid. And I always recall the 8th grade play in the English class. It wasn't even an all school play. It was literally a play for 25 kids in a classroom. I had 3 lines and forgot 2 of them in the performance. And it just was, this did not feel like a natural, organic place for me to be. But once, 2 years later, I was a very average student, Tommy. I think I didn't see as a kid, and I was raised in a family of very bright people, very well-educated people, but I wasn't making the connection between grades and life success. The classroom didn't interest me so much, so I wasn't as focused on it. And of course, so that led my grades to being very average. And one of those classes where I was very average was my geometry class as a sophomore. And my geometry teacher, good old boy from Oklahoma named Mr. Cochran, was the official scorer at our varsity basketball games at Piedmont High School. And he invited me to do the official scorebook at that season for our varsity basketball team. And we had a very good team that year. And before the first game started, and I loved that. I mean, I was able to be right there at the game and, experiencing it right at courtside if I were doing the book. Well, the cool thing was that before the first game, the officials were ready to start, and he looked over at me and said, well, so who's going to introduce the starting lineups? And sitting in front of me on the table, and anybody who talks for a living on a microphone can appreciate this. I mean, Tommy, you can appreciate this. So sitting there in front of me is this Shure microphone, old Shure silver microphone, pedestal mic. And it was like in a movie. The gym went dark except for the pin spot of light that came down on the microphone. And in that moment, Tommy, I saw my life changed in that moment, because getting to introduce the starting lineups was this opportunity to be heard. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was being heard in a situation that I was in control of. And, it wasn't about being embarrassed. It wasn't about blushing. It wasn't about any of that. It was about introducing the players who were playing in this game and announcing when they scored and how many fouls and all of this. And there was applause that followed the names. They weren't applauding me. They were applauding the guys, but I was saying the names, and that was eliciting applause. And that there was a huge connection for me in that suddenly what I said mattered in this very specific situation, it mattered. And it really literally changed my life. And 2 years later, I followed a girl I had a crush on into a high school musical and a production of Once Upon a Mattress, which was made famous back in 1959 by Carol Burnett, a young Carol Burnett who played Princess Winifred the Woebegone on Broadway. And, that changed her life. And I followed this girl I had this terrible crush on into that play and joined the chorus and absolutely loved the applause and the lights and the teamwork that was involved in putting a show on. Everything theatrical is a team effort. Everyone has to agree what they're going to do. It's all and for it all to come together and work in front of an audience. And that was really exciting for me to be embraced on a team and have a role. And it was a small role, it was a chorus part, but nonetheless, everyone has to carry their weight in those situations. And I loved that. And that really, then I was getting to be seen and heard and seen in that situation. And that was the beginning, from the basketball game to a year later standing on the stage, and I was completely hooked, and I needed to follow that wherever that would lead me.
Before Little House on the Prairie, you started acting with a very small role in the streets of San Francisco, but the first major role was in Judy Blume's Forever as Michael Wagner. What did it mean for you to be part of this major role for the first time in your career?
Well, it was a huge opportunity to get. And, I was working in commercials, and I had gotten the small part on Streets of San Francisco through an agent in San Francisco that I had been introduced to. And she agreed to represent me and started sending me out. And I started booking commercials and, these small parts. And I was called in one day to meet with a woman named Mary Goldberg, who was casting director of the CBS movie Forever. And we sat and chatted for, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And we read a little bit. And I had never read for anybody from a script before, other than a play audition. I had never had that experience, but she was lovely to me and said at the end of it, she said it would be 1,000,000 to 1 shot for you to get this, but you are perfect for this. And I'm going to fight for you to get an opportunity. And she did. And the director of this, and it was going to be shot in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is the only reason I was getting an opportunity to meet on it. It was being directed by a wonderful director named John Cordy, who had become well known for his movie special called The Autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, and another movie called Farewell to Manzanar, and an Academy Award-winning documentary called Who Are the DeBolts and How Did They Get 19 Kids? And he was just a really, really generous, kind man, a wonderful, empathetic director, and he fought for me. And really sort of when it came time to do mix and match auditions for that, Stephanie Zimbalist had been cast to be Catherine Danziger in the movie. And John said, why don't you go to San Francisco International Airport and pick up Stephanie and bring her to Mill Valley, and you two can get to know each other before this reading, and which was going to be taped and sent to CBS for them to approve or not approve. And, I was going into and when I was going into that room and I went to SFO, this was before you could go to the gate, wait for someone to come off. Here comes this, beautiful, very tailored, I think sort of China doll, beautiful Stephanie Zimbalist off the airplane. And very natural, very real. Well, we hit it off immediately. Had a great ride to Mill Valley in my Volkswagen Beetle, and she was great. I mean, she was very easy to talk to, wonderful sense of humor, very real. And we read very well together. And John set off this tape, and it all worked out. And I always remember the call I got from my San Francisco agent. It was just she just said 3 words. I picked up the phone, hi, Ann. And she said, "You got it." She was Australian, or she was from New Zealand. She had a very, very specific kind of dialect. She was lovely. And I got that opportunity and worked with Stephanie and other wonderful actors and with John Cordy. And that led me to Los Angeles and got me a wonderful agent who Stephanie introduced me to, a woman named Ina Bernstein, who was the head of television at ICM. And for those who don't know, ICM then and now is one of the biggest, most powerful talent management firms in the world. And I just went right to the top of that company with Ina. And I mean, I had no experience other than forever, but with Ina, I had access to meetings, and I had lots of meetings, and, things didn't necessarily work out. There were some offers which she said turned down because this isn't right. I mean, Ina, Ina wasn't the struggling actor. Ina was running the chessboard. And so she was more concerned about the right move, not just the move that was going to be remunerative. I needed to make money. I needed to pay my rent. Ina wasn't as concerned about this. She said, get a survival job. You need to wait for the right job. And when the Little House auditions came along, she was very clear about this. She said, of everything you've gone out on, if you get offered this, you will do this. She loved Little House. She told me she cried every Monday night when it was on. She loved Michael Landon. She loved the whole cast. She loved the whole vibe of it. Now, Ina was a, very buttoned up, proper New York businesswoman. I mean, this was a Manhattan kind of person. What I came to find out years later, Tommy, is a lot of people in Manhattan loved Little House. The numbers we got in New York were huge, big numbers in New York. And because most of the numbers in New York come out of Manhattan, and the numbers were really, really significant. So there were a lot for all the people in this, in this tough town that, the city that never sleeps. There were a lot of Little House fans, and she was among those people. And when she really encouraged this, and so, and I think she had an intuitive sense about that this was something I was really right for. So, these things. I've long believed, Tommy, you get the jobs you're supposed to get. Actors get the things that are right for them in the beginning of a career, and really throughout a career. I think it's not the actor that picks the part; it's the part that picks the actor. And because the part is the thing, the part has to fit into an overall whole. It has to be. It has to work with other actors and other characters. And so finding people will wait a long time for the right person to walk in the room. They, now in the case of, the example I always use of, someone like a Tom Cruise. If Tom Cruise walks in the room and wants to play a part, he's going to get that part.
Right.
It's just, and we've seen this, and Tom Cruise is a huge movie star. He's always fine. He's always good. He's always Tom Cruise, but he's not always right for the part. But it doesn't matter. If he wants to play it, he's going to get a chance to play it, and he's going to do a really good job, and, all that. But for the most part, in casting situations, people will wait for the person who radiates the thing that they are waiting to see. And when that person walks in the door, they know it in about 8 seconds. It doesn't take a long time. Mm-hmm. And having been on the other side of that in a casting situation, it's true. You, as a human being, we intuit a lot about people. when we meet them. We make dozens of decisions instantly about who and what somebody is when we first meet them. And this is what casting directors are paid to do. And they have to evaluate how an audience is going to react to someone that they get one look at, and they're going to make a decision. I like this person, or this person belongs here, or they don't. And I feel very fortunate. And I think, circling back to the very early part of our conversation, I think in so many ways, Tommy, I was completely raised to be this guy. I was ultimately cast as. This was not a big stretch creatively. This was no, not. I mean, I was right in the pocket of where this guy needed to be, and I think that's how most, certainly early in careers, that's how it happens. I was, as Mary Goldberg said to me, as she believed, I'm perfect for forever, 1,000,000 to 1 shot, but you're perfect. You should get this. So, when those things happen, that's when it works out. And that's when you have the best chance of it working out. And I'm fortunate in those two cases. And they were both very defining things for me. And, I was raised to be the young, respectful man in love, is how, that's how I was raised. And,
right.
And, it's interesting. You could struggle with that, or you could push back on that. You could say, "Oh no, I'm much more. I can be the dark lady killer. I can be the." And I see, I can be that. But yeah, maybe. But there are other people who are going to walk in the door with that, who are going to just do that better than you do it.
Right.
Or
correct.
Than someone else does it. And I think in the beginning, when you're an actor, you think you can do anything because you're supposed to be talented, and you think you can do it all, but you can't. Yes, maybe you can. You could read the lines, you could do, but would you be the most effective? Maybe you could be effective, but are you right in the zone? And maybe not. I think I was right in the zone for the things I was being cast as in that early time, and I'm very, very grateful for it, Tommy. All you need to do is ask me a question. I'll do 20 minutes for you.
I love it. This makes it easier on my end, but I'm going to ask you some questions about Little House on the Prairie, because I know my listeners are going to want that. But before we go there, listeners, the iconic show that's loved by millions can be streamed on Amazon Prime or Peacock. His book, Prairie Man, My Little House.
Also on iTunes.
And iTunes. Perfect. Yeah. His book, Prairie Man, My Little House, Life and Beyond, on sale June 25th. The book chronicles the business of entertainment, sports, and Little House on the Prairie. Before I ask you questions about the show, what does it mean to you, Dean, to be a published author on top of everything else you've done in your career?
Well, it's probably that's a total, that's a big surprise to me. I mean, I never thought that I would do this. I'm thinking, what do I have to say about this experience that hasn't been said? But that's then in that question, is the unique answer is, well, I'm me, and Melissa is Melissa, and Allison's Allison, and Karen Grassley is Karen Grassley, and Charlotte Stewart is Charlotte Stewart. And I realized in 2021, as I really started to look at this again, or really for the first time seriously, I realized, well, wait a minute, other than Kent McRae, who was our incredible producer, who passed away several years ago. But he, up to that point, he had been the only man associated with Little House directly to write a book about the experience. And in that was the answer. I said, I'm the only, there's no other male has written about this. There's no other perspective about this. It's exactly like mine. And that became the reason. And, And then I started thinking about the commonalities of my life with Almanzo and, all of those kinds of things that we talked about earlier. And I thought, well, maybe I do have something to say about this experience. But mainly it's just about making the decision that, you're going to craft an outline and it's going to get submitted. And my friend Mary McDonough, who was Aaron Walton on the Waltons, walked my proposal into Kensington Book Publishers in New York, and they called me 24 hours later and made an offer, and made an offer that was so far exceeded anything that I'd been prepared to receive on this. I'd gotten all kinds of, the main comment that I got said, yeah, lots of people write books. I had an agent tell me, you'll be paying them to write the book. No one's going to pay you for a book. I mean, it's just, and I was prepared to say, okay, well, maybe self-publishing is the way to do this. Maybe that's the way to go. And others in our cast have gone that route. Maybe that's how I want to approach it. But when I got the call the next day with what felt to me like a very generous offer, I said, well, this is really kismet. This is what it's supposed to be. And we went back and forth a little bit and fine-tuned what it was that they were proposing. But basically we did the deal, and I set a schedule for myself and started writing, I think on the 9th of January, 2023. I got up at 4:45 in the morning and made my coffee and went in and sat down in our dining room. The computer was ready for me at that point. And I just hit page one and started writing and working on the outline. I submitted the first draft at the end of July of 2023. And because the goal was to have it ready for the summer of 2024. And they said, well, that's fine. We can do this whenever you want, but we have to have it a year before it comes out. And when I say it, wasn't its final form a year ahead of time, but we have to have something from which to build the final form of this book basically a year ahead of when we're going to publish it. So, publishing is not an instant game. I guess it can be, but it's, it has a bit of a process to it. And so I just started writing, and every morning at 5 a.m. And some days it was 500 words, and other days it was 1,000 words, and big day 1,500 words. Well, my draft that I submitted, that I sent to my editor was following right along behind me. I would send pages. I submitted, or my draft that I submitted was like 210,000 words, which is ridiculous. I mean, that would have been like, it was just way too much. What we're publishing is 93,000 words, roughly.
Whoa.
So, yeah. So, it just, and I'm so grateful for the editor, who was very kind in the way that they went through and, shaped and massaged and moved things around. And as someone who has been involved in the crafting of content for a while, I mean, I certainly know what I've done in editing rooms, watching video of interviews or documentary content. And you have to be pretty savage about it at times.
Yes,
you've got to say, you've got to say, this goes.
Right. Yeah.
And
the proverbial cutting room floor.
Yeah, exactly. And so when my editor was saying this goes, and this goes, having been in that space, I said, okay, I trust you. Take it away. Now, there's always that, I still have that 210,000 word draft. It's in my computer. But I think what we pared it down to collectively is a much more readable, balanced perspective on, and this is really, Prairie Man is really a book for fans of Little House. And there are the other things that I cover, from personal life, professional life, romance, disappointment, all of that. But at the center of this is Little House because, well, one, was very conscious of the fact that we were going to be publishing this in the 50th anniversary year of Little House, and that was going to be the framing around which it would come out, and that's how you would promote it, So, or that's how it will be promoted is as a homage to Little House. So, it had to have at its core, people had to feel like that was, or I believed, and the publisher believed that's where the centerpiece of it had to be. And that's the way we wrote the outline for the book. So, it was very clear we were on a mission, and it was going to be to honor Little House and share elements of my life that we hope that people will find interesting and engaging and sort of, that show a totality or a broader view of a life that goes beyond Little House. But it's been a journey. It's been a journey, and here we are. I mean, we're, when this interview, it's like 2 days from now that, the book comes out. So it's like, yeah, I mean, here we are. I mean, the books are in the mail. They're in the boxes. They are being shipped.
That's right.
And I hope that people, when they get it, one, I hope people get it. And secondly, I hope they enjoy it.
As a 22-year-old that's casted onto this show, and you joined it halfway through its run in season 6, what was it like for you coming on set and working with Michael Landon and Melissa Gilbert and Allison and Karen Grassel? I mean, was the enormity to you? Did you understand the people you were around, or were you just too young and naive to realize who you were around?
Well, I certainly knew who Michael Landon was. I mean, you couldn't be a functional human being, and not know who Michael Landon was. Michael was an icon. What I didn't know about Michael, when as much as I'd heard, and particularly from my agent, who absolutely loved him. I mean, Michael was the proverbial babe magnet. Women loved Michael. The cool thing about Michael was a woman's man, and Michael was a man's man. He could be both of those things. And he did that. And he showed that in Bonanza, that he was definitely a man's man. But in Little House, he showed himself to be this very sensitive, gentle, emotional father who weathered every kind of conceivable calamity and disappointment and heartbreak, and did it with grace and dignity and an optimism that tomorrow would be a better day. I mean, he had all that. I had seen promos of Little House for a period of time, and the show had been on the air for 5 years, and I've got my eye on television. So I'm seeing that, and the promos for Little House generally always featured Michael. I mean, he was the element that the network was selling. But what I didn't know about Michael, despite the fact that Ina told me, is I really didn't have any sense. I knew Michael was, wonderful on-screen presence. What I did not know about Michael, and what you learned very quickly about Michael, is that he was a very, very, exceptionally good director, a wonderful writer, and a great producer. He wore the 4 big hats that have to be worn on any production. The star, the director, the producer, the writer. Now, Michael didn't write every episode, but he rewrote every episode. And it may have been from, a tweak of a word here and there, in some cases, to wholesale rewrites of episodes that he felt like needed to be tweaked in a very big way. And that I got really fast. And that was sort of stunning to see that. Now, Melissa Gilbert, other than seeing this cute girl with braids, and Karen Grassley, this beautiful woman who, had this sort of Grace Kelly-esque kind of beauty about her. just something just sort of tranquil and beautiful is what Karen projected. Melissa Sue Anderson, beautiful blonde with haunting eyes. You sort of knew who they were, but when you step into that, you see not only in front of the camera, but behind the camera, what an incredibly tight group this was and how good they were together. And they understood what they were trying to do. But you saw how tight it was. And so I'm starting to shoot and you get this. And then during that summer, and I had never watched Little House before. I had never, I was watching Monday Night Football. I was not watching Little House on the Prairie on Monday nights. I was not going to leave the third quarter of a really good game or fourth quarter of a really good game to watch Little House. It just was not going to happen. I often, when I saw the promos for the show, I'm saying, what is Michael Landon doing being this poor dirt farmer? When he's been this like shoot 'em up Western hero,
Little Joe.
Little Joe gets the girl. I mean, what is he doing in this show? And it was really a mystery to me. And until during that summer, as I started shooting, I was watching reruns on Monday nights. Now he has me. I mean, I'm in. I want to know more about this show. We hadn't read the books as kids. I didn't have any of that experience. So I didn't really know what this was about, what the territory was, other than it was pioneering, which is a big topic, obviously. But when I watched the show on Monday nights, I was so swept up in the storytelling, in the beautiful photography, the wonderful evocative performances, the beautiful music that accompanied each episode. And I think maybe as much as anything else, it was the music that got me. There was something so emotionally evocative about this music, particularly in those moments of tears and heartbreak, which were such a part of the Little House experience, where people are, David Rose, our composer, the show's composer, could grab you just take you in the heart and pull you in. And he was this irresistible force. He just made you laugh and cry. And I think as much as the performances were wonderful and the performances informed what he was going to write, but it was what he wrote, those melodies, those orchestrations. And I went to scoring sessions and listened to the 60-piece orchestra playing on the soundstage. And the audience at home will never hear what you could hear on the scoring stage with this incredible orchestra of players doing this. And this was the treasure of this. I started hearing the individual themes for characters that he would create to support the individual stories of, the emotional life of the different characters. And there became a Laura and Almanzo theme that came along, later when that relationship started to go. And it was a beautiful theme.
And on that theme there, Dean, I was going to ask you, what are the fans like about this love affair between the two characters?
I think they really liked it. I mean, I got letters, and I saw letters to editors in the beginning when I was first cast. And there was one I'll never forget, some Midwestern newspaper. I mean, I can't tell you where it was, but I remember essentially what the letter said. And that was that, who is this casting director who put this 23-year-old man with this 15-year-old girl? How am I supposed to teach my girls morals and values when they could turn on Little House on the Prairie and see Laura Ingalls Wilder fantasizing about this grown man? What message are we sending here? But okay, there was that letter that I saw, and our unit publicist sent it to me just to say, keep your head up. You can't win them all, but he wanted me to see it. But people were so accepting of this relationship. And I think it was because it was handled in this very romantic way. There was never, ever a sense that Laura was overpowered or overwhelmed by someone, older, more experienced, bigger than she was. All of that. I think the audience always felt that Laura was safe. Laura was always, in a sense, even though she was infatuated, was also driving the tempo of the relationship. So it never went faster than Laura wanted it to go. And I think that was really, really important. And I think it was a wonderful message for young girls that, young girls have a lot of control in relationships that they have with young men, and they just have to know they have that control and exercise it. And I think it's a very good thing. And not to stress the point too much, but the right young men will accept the tempo that a young woman sets in a relationship. And Little House was one of those places where young teenage girls got to see how relationships could go. I love the way Laura wrote the romance in these happy golden years. And I don't know if you know the books, Tommy, but the books are lovely. And now Laura had the benefit of hindsight. She wrote these books when she was, nearly 70 years old by the time she got to that book. So she could restructure this to make this what she needed it to be to serve her audience, which was predominantly young women reading these books. But she wrote it beautifully. And I think it's one of those, she wrote it in a way that empowers young women to know that they matter and that they have choices that they can make about how things are going to go in the relationships they're in. And I think that Michael, played the storybook infatuation, but in the end, Laura got the relationship came to Laura on her terms. And this was really important. And I think it's an important reason, one of the reasons why the audience was so supportive of it, because the audience loved Laura. They loved Melissa. She was America's sweetheart. And when they saw that Laura was in love, they were prepared to come right along with that. And, and I thank my lucky stars that I was the guy that was chosen to be that guy. And it has been a defining thing in my life to be that guy.
When did you realize, Dean, away from set, what was the moment that it hit you that you're part of this iconic show with Michael Landon? I mean, was it a fan experience, or when did it hit you going, whoa, wait a minute?
I think it was a fan experience. And I had gone shortly after I debuted on the show. I was with some friends and we went to an amusement park in Northern California, Great America, in the South Bay area of San Francisco. It was a popular, sort of a miniature Disneyland, as it were. And it was the first time I had been in the situation where I became really aware that people were looking at me. I'd seen that, but in a public place on a weekend with lots of kids and families there were a lot of people looking. And look, I walked off the set. I looked just the same. I mean, the hair was the same. All that was the same. I was that guy. And I wasn't thinking about disguising it. That hadn't occurred to me. And I'd never been a disguiser. I've never done that. And when the first time someone walked up to me and said, are you Almanzo on Little House on the Prairie? And I was so taken aback. I said, no, I'm not. And they were very disappointed and went away. And my friend, who was a very good friend of mine at that time, and just really, she looked at me and said, "What are you doing? You can't do that to people." That that is not an unbrave thing for this person to walk up to you and ask you this question. You have to tell them the truth. And that was a sobering moment to realize I had a responsibility here to this too. I couldn't hide from it and pretend it wasn't the situation I was in. So I did at that point make the decision that I would always acknowledge what people were asking me. And it was just that first time that was a little jarring to me, but I got used to it. And, when you're seen by 20 plus million people in primetime television, you don't realize what an awesomely powerful communication technology television is until you are in it. And then its ability to bring people to public notice is just, there is no more powerful communication, but still with everything else that's going on in our culture, there is still no more powerful information delivery system than television. And in its traditional form, it's obviously morphing into lots of different things now. But, what we had then that we don't have now, unless it's something like the Super Bowl, is you have the ability on any given night of the week to deliver audiences of 20 plus million people to 3 different networks, eventually 4. So the audience share shrank a little bit for each one. But that was today, audiences are so fragmented over hundreds of platforms. You're part of that, Tommy, with this show that you're doing. You're part of that carving up of the audience. We all are in all these things that we do. So you don't get that kind of critical mass around a show anymore, unless it is something culturally huge like the Super Bowl. And that is probably the single biggest audience delivery magnet that we have in American culture now. There's nothing else that remotely approaches that.
Not even close.
And it's sports. And sports is what's great is in order to feel like you're in the conversation, you have to watch it live. You have to know what's happened. You want to know with everybody else what's gone on. Nothing else is like that. So, and it used to be that way for everything, but now it's really come down to, that's why sports have become this very prized property on television, because there is this sense that you need to see it live. There's nothing else like that anymore.
No, things coming. Our world has changed. Simpler times are gone. Technology has taken over, but that's just part of life. We either go with it or it passes us up, and we don't have much choice with it. So you have to go with it.
Yeah. You're still fighting it. I don't think, you can push back on it, but the world is going to go on. I think this is true in so many areas. People can try and roll back the clock. There's no rolling back the clock. No. We are moving. We are always moving forward.
Yeah. We're on a bullet train.
Yeah.
We are on a bullet train.
Get ready. We're all on it. You may as well enjoy the ride because you're on it. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Listeners, the book is Prairie Man, My Little House, Life and Beyond. It's on sale June 25th. Dean, I want to end with this. What is the gratitude that you have to all those that help you achieve your dream and get to where you're at today?
There are so many people. I mean, if you've seen it, you've obviously gone through the book. There's a very large acknowledgement section at the end of the book that goes on pages and pages and pages, thanking people who have been a part of my life. It's a collective journey. Obviously the people who were really directly involved in things in the pursuit of career, those people are, there's just bottomless thanks to those people who are part of that for me. And it's very clear in the acknowledgments who those people are. I'm incredibly grateful for all of this that's happened to me, to be part of something, Tommy, that has been watched and loved for half a century. And look, we're not alone in that territory. There certainly are other programs that have achieved that, but Little House is one of those shows that has achieved that. And it's not that it's just being watched, but that it remains relevant after 50 years and that people keep seeking it out and finding it and watching it. That's a very special thing to be a part of. And I think it's because it was old when it was new. It was never out of fashion because it was never in fashion. Little House has always been this little island in the world of programming that is its own unique world unto itself. There's very little to compare it to. And that makes it, I mean, okay, we compare it. It's always compared to the Waltons, and we both casts know that we are tied together by this, in this world of really intense family television, and we are all of us very proud of that. But to be a part of that little universe is really an incredible gift. I always know, Tommy, that when I breathe my last breath, that Little House on the Prairie will be in the first line of my obituary. I know that, and I can't tell you how proud I am of that because of what it has meant to people and how people have loved it and appreciated it, and it's just been an incredible gift.
You are correct. I think Little House and the Waltons are the two shows that people can take their mind away from things, go back to a wholesome time in their life when the families used to gather around the TV and have dinners together and spend evenings around a television set, around good television that they could talk about. And those two shows do that. And since then, you can't find a show that can do that because people just don't, A, sit around a television set as a family anymore, and B, they don't talk about television shows like they did the wholesome shows of the Waltons and Little House.
I think it's one of that very thing that you're raising, Tommy, is was one of Michael Landon's most important commitments in the making of Little House, was to create something that families could sit down and watch together and talk about together. He believed so strongly in this full generational, multi-generational conversation, because that's where we all learn. Young people learn from their elders, and elders learn how the world is changing from their children. And that conversation is incredibly important, and it builds understanding and tolerance and acceptance of all kinds of things. We don't really have that today. You can be in a room with 5 people and they could all have their iPhones in front of them or their Galaxy devices, and they're all watching something different.
Right.
And they may be all interesting, but there's not as much of a shared experience. And I think there's something to be said for that shared experience that's really important for people.
Well, I said we're on a bullet train. I hope your book's on a bullet train to being a bestseller, like right away. So I wish that upon you. I hope it happens.
Thanks, Tommy. I appreciate the time and chatting with me about it. This is really quite an adventure for me.
Thank you so much for your time and coming on my show. Time's valuable, and I really appreciate yours being on here.
Thanks, Tommy.
Listeners, that's going to do it for this episode of Before the Lights. But before we go, I got to tell you, as an inspirational speaker that will inspire you to inspire others, my story of beating cancer against the odds will get you on a path to change your life. Click the links in the show notes or go to TommyCanale.com. That's TommyCanale.com. And until next time, everybody, I salute a chin chin.